Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress with an important plea for 2023. You probably read the headlines. Word Balloon took a sponsorship hit that was pretty significant, and I'm asking you if you've ever been a fan of Word Balloon and considered making a donation through Patreon, a very meager but important subscription. I hope you'll consider it. It's going to be a challenging 2023, and I need your help. So if you like Word Balloon, if you enjoy the content, I'm not going to slow down and keep bringing you some excellent content, but I could really use your help via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. If you can afford the price of a comic book, if you can even afford $1 a month, it would be greatly appreciated and help the cause to keep Word Balloon going at the level and intensity that I've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years, and bring you a lot more content and a lot of great interviews and interesting things about the pop culture world. Patreon.com/wordballoon. I could really use your help. Thank you for your attention, your time, and listening to Word Balloon. Now available to order at your local comic shop, it's Sal Abenante's new graphic novel, The Hostage.
Hostage is set in the streets of Rio de Janeiro, based on the plight of the street children that live in the favelas. In the world of the graphic novel, being murdered daily, and the hostage is the evil spirit that is raised to avenge their death. Origins go all the way back to the indigenous tribes of the Amazon as the spirits that protect children, especially murdered children. The level of death that these kids have to endure every day. They have nowhere to sleep. They have no place to eat. They have to survive off of begging. There were nobody in capes that were coming to save these kids.
Pick up Sal Abenante's latest graphic novel, The Hostage. Order now at your local comic shop through Diamond's Previews catalog. Code DEC221534. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. An interesting tribute that I want to pay today to one of the great critics, advocates, and reporters on the comic scene, and that's Calvin Reid. Calvin has been with Publishers Weekly for a very long time. He announced that he is stepping down from Publishers Weekly, and not all in all retiring, but just kind of slowing down a bit, and I look forward to talking to Calvin to hear what his future plans are, because I imagine he will still keep his hand in comics. Calvin is a great advocate for independent graphic novels, but always retained his love for superhero books as well. And I really admire that about Calvin. He's about 10 years older than me, maybe a little bit more, but regardless, I just think it's fantastic that, and forgive me if this sounds condescending, I really don't mean it to, but truly that a guy in his 60s still loves comics. I love talking to a lot of the Bronze Age writers and artists that I've gotten to know over the years, and I do ask them, I'm like, are you still reading? And mostly, I would get the response, only when I need to, because I'm doing a new story about an existing character, so I need to know what the current status quo is. I get it. You know, good Lord, I wonder how much Stan, before he passed, was really reading comics, other than if he had to. So anyway, but that's why I love the fact that Calvin, being a gentleman that is in his senior years, still loves comics. I certainly hope I'm going to be the same way when my time comes. But regardless, this is a really great conversation we did in anticipation of one of the San Diego years, 2016, and we were going to have a big comic podcaster panel, and it was going to be me and Rob Salkowitz and Heidi McDonald and Calvin, and we just had a blast. And really, Heidi's another person that I respect and I'm glad is still out there, because she's one of the people that I admired as a critic. Also, my dear friend, the late Tom Spurgeon, was another one of these guys that I'm like, I can't believe I know these people. Pretty cool. Calvin is certainly part of that list. So I wanted to wish him well and give you a taste of the kind of conversations I've been lucky to have with Calvin. Very limited times, but it was very sweet that he came on Word Balloon. So representing that on today's Word Balloon, here's Calvin Reid and a great conversation. Very happy to welcome Calvin Reid of Publishers Weekly onto the Word Balloon podcast. I'm sure I said in the intro, Calvin is one of the co-hosts of Publishers Weekly's Comics Edition. More to come. Did I say the title right?
Yes, well, that's close enough. Yeah, no, it's the PW Comics World's podcast. More to come. I think that's kind of how we say it on the air. But you got it.
Excellent. Well, no, seriously, man, I am always happy to have podcasts that I like come on the show and get a chance to pick their brains. And also really happy that you're going to be on the podcast panel at San Diego this year, too.
Well, obviously, thanks for inviting me onto this podcast. I'm excited to be on the panel. I have not been on in the past, and in fact, I haven't been able to get around for one reason or other in the past. So I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll be able to be there for the other podcasters, and be able to throw my 2 cents in as well.
Excellent, man. No, hey, we always have tough competition. I haven't compared yet to see what we're up against, but there's always like a really good movie, panel that's going on or TV stuff. So that's why, they put us in the small room, but we usually do okay. And I also think with our combined audiences, we do okay. And I'm sure it'll come up before the panel. I'm going to, record it and play it on Word Balloon. And certainly you guys are welcome to do the same. And I know John Mayo does it for Comic Book Page, and some of the other guys on the panel sometimes do it. So, if you guys run it. So very cool, man. And I asked you before we started rolling, how long have you been doing the PW podcast?
Well, it's funny. Knowing I was going to be on here, I actually went to iTunes to look it up because I was a little fuzzy. But it looks as though we did our first More to Come in the summer of 2011, and so we're kind of right. I guess it's about our 4th year doing it, and we've gone through some changes. I hope we've gotten better, but 4 years. So yeah, even when I realized that, I was kind of said, "Wow."
That's awesome. And what was the reasoning behind doing the podcast? Because clearly you and Heidi, obviously, you guys are writing articles all the time covering this stuff. Why'd you feel the need to include, an audio component to what you guys do?
Well, I think one of the things was we wanted to have another channel to cover comics in another way. I think we wanted another way to kind of get out our take, and just to give you a little background, I mean the comics coverage at Publishers Weekly, we are the trade journal of the book industry, and years ago when I started our coverage, brought in Heidi a little later, who has of course made everything a lot better than what I started with. But the whole idea was to highlight comics in the book trade. When I started working at PW, and I guess goes back a few years, it was in the mid 1980s. Comics was still overwhelmingly purely a periodical, front list oriented publishing, category. The books, the book side of it was there. It was undeveloped. You really couldn't walk into bookstores necessarily and automatically find comics. So to have a podcast, to me, as we saw the technology developing, was just another way for us to get our message out to that the book industry is interested in comics, and this is an important channel for people and for readers to engage comics. So it really was just another way to attach another tentacle of our coverage.
Well, this is why I wanted you on the podcast panel, and B, why I love your guys' show, because I think, and truly I mean this about your producer Katie as well. What's Katie's last name? Because I never remember.
Oh, Kate Fitzsimmons.
Kate Fitzsimmons. Okay, so you got Kate Fitzsimmons, Heidi McDonald, and yourself. I think you guys are all really good observers of what's going on, and you have. I always love these reporter roundtable shows. I'm a big fan of the sports reporters on ESPN back in the day, and in Chicago we had on our local television a local sports cable show featuring Sun Times and Chicago Tribune sports writers, and it started on radio and then went to TV. And that's the thing. I just think the people that cover it day in and day out, as you guys do, and are able to get together and compare notes. I always find I come from a sports talk background.
Yeah, I was looking you up, and I saw, actually, I mean, I knew about the podcast, but I didn't realize about your background in sports writing and in boxing, too, as a matter of fact, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm a big, a long time, man. And really, again, another reason why I enjoyed covering big fights and having us all there and just really getting the chance to just, even informally, kick around what's going on and what we're all seeing. And it was always reasonably fraternal. I mean, we all were competitive and trying to get our own stuff out there. But by the same token, just kind of, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm seeing and comparing notes. And that's what I like about your guys' show and what I'm looking forward to about next week as well.
Yeah, I mean, we really saw it as a way that we could cover things in a way that really maybe we couldn't quite do it in the print magazine or even in our online coverage. And also, I think it was also at a time when, just to give you even a little more background, Publishers Weekly was acquired away from a gigantic, octopus-like corporation in 2010 by our new owner, George Slowick. And the magazine was really remaking itself in many ways. And digital media was high on the priority. This is something we wanted to do. Plus, we also thought it was something that our bosses would say, hey, great. If you can do it, run with it. And in fact, early on, we had some technical issues because we didn't have quite the infrastructure to do it. That's where Katie came in addition to being a supremely knowledgeable comic book nerd, really across the board.
Yeah.
In almost any category you can think of. She's a real super fan. She's done all kinds of podcasts, video casts. She's got the technical skills. She actually really kind of jury-rigged the system up for us to get us going. Because people always will sort of say, oh, well, look, as soon as we get the pipe set up, we'll get you going. But of course, we knew that we needed to kind of learn what we were doing here, and
absolutely.
Kind of by doing it, and so we kind of did it ourselves. It's kind of a DIY, thanks to Katie, and so now we've evolved to another level where our editors are very happy with us. We did get a big technical upgrade so that the whole show is so much better now, so much better sounding now than it used to be. So we've come a long way, but really we just saw it, digital technology and podcast as just another way to get our coverage out there.
Interesting that you guys got bought just around the same time that the big shifts were happening at DC and Marvel. Really,
yeah, good point. Yeah, that was about 2009 when Warner sort of basically took control and started making big changes at DC.
Yep. And obviously Disney, and Disney and Marvel kind of, really starting to reap the success that, their association has had. So, and it's great to hear, too, that your coverage goes back to the 80s because, again, and much like Tidy as well, you guys have this kind of market perspective of seeing where things were as they, comparing to as they change now. And, that's the great thing. Every week, you guys are talking about stuff. You talked about the Rick Remender controversy, obviously, last week on your most recent episode. And, even DC's royalty payment structure changing. And I think you guys do a great job of explaining these issues or at least, subjects. It's interesting because and I'm curious about your opinion because certainly with social media – I think fan entitlement, and it's something that you guys talked about specifically with Remender, is at an all-time high. And again, coming from sports talk and stuff, I saw it with sports fans as well. So, there is this line of, hey, man, if you don't like it, don't buy it. But I do think that some people get so passionate, which is a good thing, and really do feel like they have a sense of ownership on these subjects that sometimes they do overstep what their role was. But the market is changing and their role is changing as well.
You know what? Obviously, I do agree with you. I'm a huge sports fan as well, as a huge comics fan, and and I'm a little older. I'm 62 years old. I grew up in the 60s.
Okay.
I came out of another kind of sports world into the present, just as though in the same way that I've sort of bridged a different publishing world, the old school non-digital publishing world, and now I find myself in this new one. Yeah, it's funny. At the end of our last podcast, I think, and this didn't go in the podcast, I think as we were talking about the Captain America imbroglio, I sort of said, the best thing that ever happened to comics, among the things, was the rise of the internet and how it's brought fans together. And I said, the worst thing that's happened to comics? Maybe the rise of the internet and how it's brought all comics fans together. And I'm saying that only joking, but really in the sense that there does seem to be this a line that's crossed between, issuing your opinion and sort of creating this virtual mob that sort of rampages around, on issues, whether it's got any facts or not.
Yeah. That kind of wildfire, and you guys even made the allusion too of the villagers, the torch-bearing villagers, kind of storming.
There's a little bit of that. Now, I'll say this: at the end of the day, I'd rather have more people talking and engaged and passionate about the subject than the old days, where we were kind of basically isolated, and you could send letters, and obviously it was getting snail mail was sort of one of the main ways of connecting between artists and other fans.
Yes.
And the internet has has done great things in the sense that it's given fans a power in some ways, so that they aren't so disregarded as they were in the past. But it also has created, I think, a new reality where I think everybody, artists, publishers, can sort of feel like they're being lined up against a wall.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely.
And the fans are coming after them, and often, in some cases, not in all cases, without the facts.
Understood. And you're right. And again, that's why I'm glad that there are journalists such as yourselves that really can go, okay, no, but this is what really happened, and let's separate the opinion from fact and get down to, and then make your judgments and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
The other problem, though, is, and it's something that I've talked about with all the creators that are involving themselves in crowdfunding, not just Kickstarter, but the other platforms as well, and that kind of, again, hand-in-hand thing of going directly to your audience and saying, support my project. So there is a little bit of ownership in terms of, well, hey, man, we're funding this. And it is beyond buying something from DC and Marvel where they're going to put out the donuts every week no matter what, versus Creator X going, hey, this is my passion project, I'm raising money. And again, it's this interesting line of, the fan involvement and support. And again, this overextension of entitlement in some cases.
Yeah, well, once again, there's a lot of. I'm trying not to paint the fans overly as in an overly negative light, because I do think that when you look at what digital media has done, it's really empowered artists, and in many ways, it's done that by empowering the fans to support the people that they really love. I mean, obviously, Kickstarter is one example of this. I mean, there are other things out there. I think even you're up on Patreon, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this is a revolutionary platform, and this is. I mean, and I'm happy to just immediately, say, look, this is one area where the fans can show in the most positive way how much they care about something by basically coughing up the dough to help people do projects in many cases that would never have existed otherwise. So we live in a really a new, complex era now. I mean, I've said this many times. It's a new golden era for comics, and I really do believe that. Even if there's some things that happen now that I'm not so crazy about, nevertheless, I think we are in the best of all possible worlds right now. Digital media has enabled so much creativity. It's really allowed artists, and I think this is really what's important to me. I mean, it's really given artists options in an industry where often they didn't have very many at all.
Absolutely, man. And honestly, and forgive me if this sounds condescending because I don't mean it this way. It's great to see, because you're a little bit older than me. Not that much older, but you are older than me. And no, but honestly, I see it as well. And again, as a media observer and a media participant, you know, me in broadcasting and you in print, and now obviously in podcasting as well, it's neat to see, and I can hear it in the excitement in your voice too, that you get it and see this as the golden opportunity that it is. Because I know a lot of people in the broadcast business that still don't know what to make of new media and the opportunities that it presents to themselves, let alone the things that they cover. And it's
absolutely,
you know, I mean, that's what, your work and your words speak for themselves. That's awesome. Go on.
No, we're still in the process of educating, you know, professionally within the industry. I mean, for lots of good reasons. I mean, in fact, I think one of the things that I love about our podcast, and that, you know, all three of us among the hosts, we bring our backgrounds to the show. And, you know, I cover the comics industry, but, you know, principally my job is to cover the book industry in general. And these issues are much the same in both industries, whether you're talking about the conventional book industry or the conventional comics industry.
Okay.
These issues, disintermediation of retailers, the growth of digital distribution, how it's affecting artists, how it's affecting publishers, how it's affecting retailers, the rise of the thing. I mean, these are all issues that that affect you no matter what you're publishing. So I feel like it's great that I can bring some of my general publishing information to my reporting on comics, but also to bring stuff from comics, which in many cases is kind of on the cutting edge, even beyond what's going on in general book publishing, to the other side of my gig. So, yeah, this is a great time, and then what you're seeing in the general book publishing industry is, among conventional, longtime professionals, some reluctance to embrace the digital transition. But you know what? Many of them have, and at the end of the day, you better be paying attention to it, because this is going to, I personally am not a big believer that it's going to wipe out conventional publishing, but I think it's a whole new side of publishing is rising up, and we're seeing it.
That's cool. Yeah, you know, to me as a broadcaster, it reminds me of when cable really took off in the early 80s. And,
good point.
You know, and that it could sit alongside terrestrial broadcast media and stuff. And I feel the same way about the new streaming media that is happening right now. And obviously it sounds like, you know, so is it fair to say then, and I want your opinion on, as the, you know, Wednesday Warrior retailers, you know, the comic book stores have to make room for their digital neighbors, you know, you think that both can exist alongside of each other and thrive?
Well, you know, what's been happening on that front is that, and this isn't my idea, the comics retailers themselves have completely gone through a transformation about digital media and how it will impact their businesses. And I'd have to say right now, if you walk through most comic shops and ask them, what's their take on digital media, I think what you'll hear is that, you know what, it's creating new readers who are coming into our shops looking for books that we would have never thought a newcomer would be asking for. We do in addition to our podcast and other coverage, we do an annual feature where we, as we're a traditional book industry trade journal, but we do our best to cover the direct market, the comic shop market as well. And this is one of the features in the year where we talk primarily to comic shop owners. And we do talk to some general bookstores for the feature as well. But we basically talk to retailers. It's not a scientific survey. I always want to make that clear. It is an informal survey where we talk with usually up around 10 retailers, usually in different parts of the country.
Okay.
And we just we go over how the holiday season was. It's usually earlier in the year, how the holiday season was for them, and what are the biggest trends that they see in their stores right now, and then what do they see, going forward in the short term. And the biggest transformation I've seen began in late 2011, after the launch of the New 52, when DC went day and date. That seemed to be kind of a turning point, a tipping point, where after that we started hearing from retailers who were absolutely terrified of digital up until that point, and really thought it was going to undermine their businesses,
sure,
to hearing a far different story in 2010 and 2012, in that they're seeing new readers come in their stores. They're not necessarily looking for Marvel and DC. They're looking for Image Comics, and interestingly enough, they're looking for independent workers, and they're looking for a broader array of comics, just at a time when there is a huge amount of diversity of genres in the retail scene. So, my point right now is that, we're at a really great time where retailers see digital as, in fact, working hand in hand to support print.
And how about on the bookseller side, the traditional bookseller side? I would talk to guys like Greg Rucka and Brubaker and say, isn't it a shame that your guys' crime comics aren't in the crime section or the mystery section? And you could say that about steampunk and all the genres that we get in comic books. Are the book retailers, getting it in terms of stocking the stuff, and are we seeing impressive numbers? You guys got access to the book scan numbers, or to some degree at least. And tell me how are comics playing from a number standpoint, but more importantly too, are they also seeking out those Image and other independent creators? Because DC, Time Warner and Disney have no problem with their distribution of their product. It is a question of the IDWs, the Image, Dark Horse, all these other guys. Are they getting to the general audience in the bookstores, and is their products making an impact?
I think what you'll hear now, if you talk to any publisher, first off, you can see it. Almost every periodical series is collected into trade paperback.
Right.
I mean, it's got to be over 90%. Everything isn't picked, but almost everything. Most of the publishers that I talk to, they're very clear that their publishing plan includes both periodicals and book collections and book distribution. I think if you go through either from the big two to the new independents, everyone will tell you their business plan includes either obviously distribution by Diamond Comics, but in many cases distribution by Diamond Book to the trade book side. If I'm not mistaken, the combined periodical book market for books in the U.S. is usually around 700 million or so. That's almost equally divided between periodicals and book format comics. And this is something that has only existed in most recently over the last 10 to 15 years.
Right.
And if I may so, I think Publishers, if I may say so, Publishers Weekly, as well as trends like the internet, librarians, having far more respect for comics, I think all of this has been a part of creating a new market for book format comics that almost didn't exist like 20 years ago. So yes, the book channel side of the business, I think is growing. It hit a wall in the recession year,
sure.
And I think dropped back a bit. But once again, in the years since the more or less end of the Great Recession, and as well as the launch of digital comics and the continuing growth of the popularity of digital comics, the book channel side has grown back again. So we're kind of we're on a growth mode.
Okay.
And this is reflected both in the book scan numbers, but just as well. I mean, I get a lot of my information from Milton Gripe and from ICV2.
Certainly.
I mean, really, book scan can tell you about individual titles, but really, there's nobody goes out there and really comes in with any creditable numbers about the size of the whole industry, and that's Milton. So we use ICV2 numbers too, and that's what he's telling us, and I have no reason to doubt them. And plus, I've been here in the book industry. I've seen where the book publishing side of the industry has gone from really only sporadic, I should say this, book collections of the great newspaper comic strips were always a big feature in the book industry.
Absolutely,
Peanuts,
man.
obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Far Side, Doonesbury, and the like. But, book-length narrative, fiction, and serious nonfiction, that was not so always the case. Now, if you go to the big New York City trade publishers, Random House, Penguin, HarperCollins, either they have standalone graphic novel imprints or acquiring graphic novels either for YA, which is the booming part of the business right now,
certainly,
or for adults, is an established part of their publishing program. This was not the case in the years when I first started in book publishing.
There's a lot more comics criticism that's being published as well, and I'm glad to see that, and I think we're getting good collections of essays of one subject, and you get a bunch of writers talking about a specific artist or writer or creator or a subject. I mean, Sequart does those like Legion books.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
How is that stuff playing? Because I always think, us comic fans want the comics medium to be taken more seriously. And it always seems to me that it's that level of criticism, the sophistication of it, and also the acceptance of the audience that elevates a medium to be regarded as, and forgive me, but there's no better words to describe it, a more serious art. And again,
yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't cite chapter and verse, but clearly comics criticism is an important element on that. Now, I also know that there's been quite a bit of discussion these days about the dearth of serious comics criticism, so I'm not quite sure how to resolve that. I mean, that seems to be an issue too, but as I look around, there seem to be more and more people writing seriously about comics in more different places. I think you also find that there's a far greater, there seems to be a growth of study in comics at the academic level.
Yep.
There's also, the University Presses of Mississippi, which has long had a publishing program as a university press of publishing serious academic studies on all kinds of topics in comics. And then once again, we're also seeing the rise of serious nonfiction. I mean, it's easy to cite, Joe Sacco
yes.
as kind of a pioneering influence. But I mean, I'm talking about comics that look at history, that look at politics. I mean, if you look at Hill and Wang, which is the great history imprint of Farrar Straus Giroux, I mean, they started a line of comics several years ago called Novel Graphics, devoted to nonfiction comics, and they've done a long list of books. I mean, they had a graphic examination of the Affordable Health Care Act out. Just as the healthcare was coming to the market, you could buy a graphic work that talks about the issues around it, critic, pro and con, and what it was trying to do. So, in almost every way, as comics have made their way into the larger reading market, and this is not to knock the traditional comics industry, but just that this is a natural progression of comics out of its sometimes sort of self-imposed ghettoization as a purely a fan effort,
yes,
but as a reader. I mean, I think that's one of the key elements of the book industry. This is where the readers are. And as comics have reached into the mainstream culture and into retail comic shops, general interest bookstores, what's happening, of course, is the genres are diversifying. And one of the things that we have not always been able to say in U.S. comics is there are comics for everyone.
Indeed. Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought up those nonfiction comics, because it's what Will Eisner was able to convince the military to do with
Sure.
magazine and get the enlisted to understand the technical manuals better. And yeah, I'm assuming that same publisher did the 9/11 commission.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
there you
absolutely.
go. And
absolutely.
also, damn it, I'm forgetting the congressman's name that did the wonderful.
Oh yes, well, one of the great bestsellers last year was March Book One, which actually was published by Top Shelf by Representative John Lewis, the great civil rights icon.
Here.
Written by Andrew Iden and art by Nate Powell. And it's funny, I just did a story this morning about just announcing the cover art for March Book 2, because it's a 3-volume.
Yes.
graphic memoir of this guy who is a great American hero.
Here, here.
And so that's coming in January, rather early 2015. So I just did a story about that. So it's a serious memoir as well. I mean, it's interesting that I guess kind of during the 80s and the autobiographical comics movement, obviously most identified with Harvey Pekar, we've seen this explosion of first-person memoir. But really, we're receiving even more stuff just based on history, politics. It's really an exciting time to be in comics, no matter what kind of comics you're making.
I haven't had a chance to read Chuck Dixon's Depression era comic, and I know that
I haven't had a chance to read it either. It was in here, but I've got to get a copy of it. But go on, sorry.
No, not at all. No, and obviously we're both looking forward to it because, yes, as you were saying about politically as well, I found, and we haven't talked about it on Word Balloon yet, but if listeners don't know, Chuck Dixon, it was covered pretty well in the blogosphere, and I imagine if people listen to the podcast, they're reading the blogs and everything. But yeah, Chuck kind of really made a big point and made an editorial with his collaborator in the Wall Street Journal about the fair, whether there's too much conservative or that there's too much liberalism at the big two, and that's what's keeping him out. And of course, it was conveniently as he was releasing his comic book adaptation of a look at the Depression from a conservative standpoint. And shame on me that I don't have the original book's title and author. But I on the one hand, I applaud.
I think it's called The Forgotten Man, if I'm not mistaken.
It is The Forgotten Man. Thank you. Absolutely. And yeah, on the one hand, I think it's great. And I'm Father Flanagan. There's no such thing as a bad comic book. It's like every point of view should be available from a very First Amendment standpoint. By the same token, I am interested to see as well because, sometimes politics does get in the way of historical perspective. So that in particular is a comic that I am interested in reading. And I've got a good relationship with Chuck despite being, opposed to him on a lot of political things. But we've always had reasonable conversations. And I'm considering, I'm like, I'm going to read it because I don't do critiques on my show. But my thing is, if I like something, then they're on the show. So my feeling is, or that again, even not a taste thing, but if I think it's worth reading, then they're on the show. So
yeah, well, I think we discussed this a little bit on More to Come, but yeah, we reviewed the book here. I mean, Heidi McDonald is in fact our graphic novels review editor. So the book was in the office, and I saw it, and it went through our review process. I haven't had a chance to read it myself, but I would like to. I mean, I'm not so sure just whether conservatives are being persecuted in the comics industry, but the book industry in general, obviously is generally sort of, painted as a, liberal bastion that's, pushing conservatives out. People can make up their own minds about whether that's true or not, but certainly I haven't seen a whole lot of graphic novels and conservatives from the conservative point of view, but bring them on. I'd love to read them, and we'll read them, and we'll decide for ourselves what we think of them.
Well, that's the thing, man. I mean, and especially in this current era where I do think the power resides in the creators, it's like if you don't think those voices are out there, step up and make it. And that's why it's like, by all means, again, I think it's playing to a base when it was presented in the Wall Street Journal. It is a business paper, but it definitely has a conservative bent to it. And yeah, I am curious, but I agree with you in terms of when Chuck was crying, saying, and crying is a bad characterization, but claiming that there might be some political discrimination about him getting jobs. And I'm like, I know a lot of conservatives that are doing quite well at DC and Marvel, and even without even trying could name Billy Tucci and Bill Willingham, who are very, they've made their politics known publicly. Ethan Van Sciver's another guy that's made his politics known publicly. They seem to get jobs at the big two.
I interviewed Frank Miller, and he made no bones about his political positions. So
you're right, holy terror, absolutely, man, that's true. Oh my God, that's funny. But yeah, and also, like you said, and I'm glad to see. I was talking with Diana Schutz, and she was talking about how comics criticism is finally really, taking hold in the academic circles, and that it's really being treated like a real art form and worthy of discussion in classes and stuff. And it's interesting to see the institutions that are embracing it and the ones that there is still reluctance. I know that there are colleges that had comic book people, starting writers programs, and the department chairs are like, well, no, we don't really want comic books. And even in fact, to the point of them saying, I don't know if professionals really have a place in teaching students. And I'm like, my God, that's exactly who you need teaching students, are people that know how to get the jobs. I mean, these people want to not only pursue their art, but obviously, hopefully, be commercial artists in making their art and stuff. And I know, again, from a broadcast standpoint, there's value to be taught by people who actually have done the job and can tell you what to avoid while you're pursuing your own creative curiosity and interests. So it's an interesting time that both, like I said, there's acceptance and also still reluctance in a lot of academic circles.
Yeah, but and just speaking directly to academic circles, I mean, and that's and clearly there are issues around us, and even going back to our just breakdown between liberal and conservative politics. I mean, we see big censorship issues with Alison Bechdel's Fun Home in South Carolina, the big conflict about was it the College of Charleston or it's some South Carolina university that had Fun Home on a reading list, and some conservative state legislators took issue with it, and there's a big back and to and fro over about removing some funding. So there's that side of it. On the other hand, you see college campuses taking on. I mean, we were just talking about Representative John Lewis's book. I mean, there's a number of campuses that have made it, required reading for freshmen. I don't know if you know about Rob Salkowitz, the futurist author who writes about comics and pop culture.
He's on this very program with you, man. Absolutely, go on about.
Oh yes, great guy. Always, real visionary guy. I mean, I was interviewed by Skype from his class at, I believe it's the University of Washington in Seattle. So he's bringing the industry and people who cover and work in the industry right into his classroom, using technology. And and if you look around the country, other things are doing. So on the one hand we have that, but on the other hand we also have this real hunger for what comics can bring to the table educationally, critically, intellectually, culturally. So it's once again, it's really a new golden age for the medium.
That's excellent, man. And, it is this kind of conversation that you can find each week on Calvin's podcast as well. And say the title again, because I want people to find it correctly on iTunes.
There's more to come, and we're the podcast for Publishers Weekly's Comics World. And Comics World is just our way of describing our online and print coverage of the comics and graphic novel publishing.
So give people the URL of. I mean, I'm assuming there's a specific place on the Weekly website.
Yeah, I always direct people to go to publishersweekly.com/comics. That's the front page of the comics department there. And when you get to the page, you'll see buttons and links to, whatever our current coverage is. There's a link to the podcast archive and which has the most recent podcast, as well as, you can go back all the way to the beginning to our first one. If you want to compare sound quality then and now, you might want to try that. But go to publishersweekly.com/comics.
Excellent. And, check out the podcast, because not only do they have the weekly roundtables, but they go out to conventions, and they were at Special Edition, and there were floor interviews from there. There were floor interviews from Heroes World. I enjoyed your conversation with Charlie Brownstein,
great.
Comic Book Legal Defense Fund in particular, and talking about some of these very issues that we were talking about today with the libraries and, and stores, certainly. And it's amazing that in this era that there's still these kind of First Amendment problems. But then again, when you see all the the political headlines of today, and we really are a 50-50 country, I guess it isn't surprising that this is still a problem.
I guess it's not surprising, and it's also gratifying that obviously we've got someone like the CBLDF out there, basically making sure that that your right to read, remains. So, yeah,
absolutely, man. Well, and I know you got a meeting coming up, so we'll wrap up for today. But it really was a pleasure having you on. I hope you will come back. And
absolutely.
Oh,
it's
great,
been a blast, man. Thanks for inviting me. I really and I'm even more looking forward to being on the panel in San Diego.
Here, man. Meeting you face to face, and I'm gonna, shoot you an email and everybody else that's on the panel to make sure that if there's something that you want to throw out there as far as discussion and stuff, that we get a crack at it. Because, like I say, it's when we're at Comic-Con, it's like sports writers at the Super Bowl or any big sporting event, where it's like, this is our chance to take pulse of the industry. And that's what, Salkowitz is doing on his panel with Heidi and Tim, and I'm moderating that panel. So,
great. Okay, terrific.
Yeah, man. So, thanks for your time today, and Word Balloon listeners will hear you in a couple of weeks as well on the podcaster panel. But thank you, Calvin Reid.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, man. Had a great time.
There you go, Calvin Reid. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. This week, as I represent that Calvin interview, I hope you also notice some of the other Word Balloon reprints that we put up this week. But new conversations to end the week. On Wednesday, I'm going to have two different conversations. One with Chip Zdarsky, talking about Batman and Daredevil, and of course, the public domain, which the trade is coming out very soon. So we're going to talk about all these things, plus take your questions. I look forward to it as always. Chip's one of my guys. Also tonight, two of my guys, and they are Steve Bryan and Don Cardenas. And they've got a really cool supernatural book that has a 90s punk band vibe to it. I think it's very great, and we'll talk about that with them. That will be happening at 9:30 Central Time, so that's 10:30 Eastern, 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central. Zdarsky and I are going to be talking at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. West Coast time. So that's going to be great. Thursday, Josh Williamson comes back, and we're going to be talking about, his wrap-up to Dark Crisis, the current status quo of the DC Universe, and all of his great DC books. And also he's got a new Image book coming out as well, so we'll be talking about that. Friday, Michael Jan Friedman is back, one of my favorite Star Trek writers of novels and comics, and one episode of Voyager as well. And he's got a new Kickstarter that I'm always happy to have Michael on to talk about whatever new projects he's got going. And also, it gives me a chance to go through some of his old Star Trek novels and have a nice Star Trek talk with him as well. So that's Michael Jan Friedman. That's going to be happening on Friday night. All that to wrap up this week on Word Balloon. I hope you'll join me. It's going to be great. Until next time, thanks a lot for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2023. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.